bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. Too many years.
Welcome everyone. My name is Valtteri Haikarainen and I'm part of Aalto Entrepreneurship Society. Today with Aalto Ventures program we bring to you Unfolding Tomorrow. Unfolding Tomorrow is an event that brings together academia, business and politicians to raise awareness on the most pressing issues we face today. With Christmas just around the corner, what would be a more suitable topic than food and food waste? The United Nations has set the goal to have the global food waste per capita to halve. And with today we will be having a panel discussion and keynote speeches. And the first keynote speaker of today is the researcher at Helsinki Institute of Science, a biologist whose expertise is in environment ecology and plant physiology. Her research interests lie primarily in the environmental impact of agriculture, food loss, and urban agriculture. Please be welcome, Maria Roitto.
Okay, thank you, and hello to everyone. I have a short presentation here. I share the screen. Okay, so is this view now okay?
Yes, the view is okay. Perfect.
Okay, so we had this kind of study with a food company, Paulik, about food loss in the beginning of supply chain. So we shall now go far away. Here you can see coffee plant, coffee berries. So actually they are not beans, but berries. So, and we were studying the quantity and of the food loss and the potential to reduce it in the countries that produce raw materials for Paulik. And we had about 10 plant-based raw materials. They include coffee, black pepper, chili pepper, different oil plants such as sunflower and rapeseed oil, and then wheat, corn, and then we were looking about the food loss of these plant-based materials. And here I saw the difference between food loss and food waste. The first one is in the production, post-harvest and distribution parts of this food chain. And later is this shop and consumers that maybe is more familiar for everyone. And our aims were to find out where in the food chain and why is the food loss produced. And what is the amount of this food loss? We were looking for percent values for each plant-based raw material. And then we wanted to find out how to reduce this food loss. And this study was based on published papers. And here on right you can see black pepper that actually comes from the same plant as green pepper and white pepper. It's just a different timing of harvesting for those all. And then we have this kind of difference between developing and developed countries. So high income countries, like here in Finland, the waste is big in the late phase of this supply chain. And in low income countries, loss is in the beginning of the supply chain. And here I have one example. This is a chili pepper that comes from India. And here are some reasons for food loss. It's weather, pest diseases, management, and growth conditions in the fields. And the weather will have an impact, for example, on the quality of the plants. The next step is the harvest and post-harvest. And the timing of harvest is very important for many plant species. Then loss comes from damage that may take place during harvesting processes, and also quality standards. If the products don't reach the quality standard, they maybe are discarded because they are not used for food. And then we go further, and then is transport and storage. If there are poor facilities for those, then food loss will take place again. Also, long distances and long storage time may reduce the yield. And climate is mentioned here. For example, if the climate is very humid and hot, the storage of products may be very difficult. And here some more reasons for food loss. Is price. If too much products, nobody is buying them. Then lack of training, and not enough money, and lack of facilities and proper technology, and socio-economic factors. They all may cause food loss in these low-income countries mostly. Then how to reduce food loss of this chili pepper, for example. We would need more local investments, education, and training of the farmers. And for example, use high quality seed. And when there's this timing of harvesting, then maybe more harvesting times needed to get better quality chili peppers. Then sorting standards could be developed more. And of course, this improved storage, packing, transport, and market facilities. And also important is this marketing support for smallholder farmers and women. And here are fields of chili pepper. Thank you. And then I have one more slide from our another project is this circular food, where we aim to promote circular food economy together with City of Helsinki and Vantaa and Metropolia Applied University. And we will have this kind of campaign in January or in February. The restaurant staff will give best food waste tips for people. And we have made YouTube videos for those tips, how to use waste food for food again. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for your interesting presentation. Also to our viewers, we have a chat in YouTube where you can drop down questions, and we will try to tackle them and answer them during this stream. Now I bring you our second keynote speaker. She is the Vice President leading communications and sustainability at one of the most iconic Finnish companies, that is Paulig. And Paulig has taken active role to fight food loss and food waste in its whole value chain from farm to fork. Please welcome Kaisa Lipponen.
Hello, nice to see you. I'll try to share my screen as well. Okay, just a moment. How about now? Are you able to see?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So thanks.
Could you?
Yeah, I have to change the display setting probably. Yes. How about now?
Now it's great.
Okay, good. So my name is Kaisa Lipponen. I'm responsible for communications and sustainability at Paulig and a member of our leadership team also. And like you told already that, I work for Paulig, which is an international food and beverage company. We have operations in 13 countries and we have 10 factories in 5 countries. And we employ over 2,000 people, and the revenue is almost 1 billion euros. And our portfolio of products includes Tex-Mex products, which you can see there, Santa Maria and spices, and then coffee and different kind of drinks, plant-based protein called pulled oats, nyhtökaura in Finnish, as well as different kind of breakfast products and snacks. And the company is 100% family owned by the Paulig family. So we have an ambition to first of all be one of the fastest growing food and beverage companies in Europe. But we also want to become a sustainable frontrunner in the industry. And here you can see our sustainability approach, which is based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And as you can see, one of the goals which we have prioritized is sustainable or responsible consumption and production. And in our sustainability program, we have these 3 focus areas and an ambition for all of them. Food waste is particularly interesting for us in the focus area of climate action and circularity. And what do we think about food waste? So first of all, we are a food company, so we love food and we produce food for enjoyment, so that people can actually enjoy good food. So we always produce good food for to be eaten, so not to be wasted. And our purpose is for a life full of full of flavor. So we all, as we are in the middle of the food value chain, we see the both parts of the value chain: the beginning where the raw materials are produced, and then also the other part or the other end where the consumers are. And we can of course have an impact to both directions. And we want to be a force of good here and help both the ends of the value chain to improve, and of course in our own operations as well. And we understand that this is not something that we can change alone, but we need to involve the entire food value chain and collaborate with our partners in order to minimize food waste and food loss in the value chain. And like I explained, we take the perspective of the full value chain of food, which is quite long. So there are a lot of operators in this value chain, which also makes food waste and food loss quite a complex problem. It's one of these weakest problems in the world. It's very difficult to change it because there are so many different kind of operators in this value chain, and things are connected with each other in a way that we cannot really control always. So we support the goal to reduce to halve food waste by 2030, and we have set the same goal for us. And now we have actions for 3 parts of the value chain currently. So both in the raw material countries of origin in our own operations, and then towards consumers as well. And I will now share a couple of examples what we are doing. So, like Maria already explained, we have done a research collaboration with the University of Helsinki, and why we wanted to do this. What we currently know, we know already quite well the carbon footprint of our operations, but for example, this food loss and its impact is not so well known, and for that reason we wanted to make this research to understand where are the biggest opportunities to actually reduce food loss in the countries of origin. And as you can see from the map, we source raw materials from 80 different countries worldwide, and many of the raw materials actually come from the developing countries. So there are many aspects what comes to the food loss that we at the same time we also have to take into account the farmers and their livelihoods and so on. So this is not an easy issue to solve. But if we are able to understand better what are the reasons for the food loss in the countries of origin, we might be able to also change our own operations and develop new products from the side streams, or then also introduce new ways of producing food and support the farmers in the countries of origin. So this research with the University of Helsinki was the starting point for this work, and we will definitely continue on this path also in the future. And then in our own operations, there are multiple ways how we continuously want to improve. Packaging is one interesting area, which is often the most visible part of the of sustainability to consumers also. And the most important task of the packaging is actually to protect the product. So if you think about, for example, the plastics, which is used a lot still in food products, that's actually one of the best materials to protect the food and keep the quality of the food good. So I hope that we don't have to completely get rid of the plastic, because that would create even more challenges for the packaging development. Of course, we always try to search for new materials and for example renewable based materials, but still it still has its value in the packaging development. Here is an example of the latest development in the food oat packaging. Then there is a picture from our tortilla production. We produce tortillas in 3 countries, in Sweden, UK, and Belgium. And there we, of course, we try to minimize the waste as well, and we are able to kind of reuse the extra dough which comes from the process and use it again to produce tortillas without any impact on the quality. So this is of course very practical example how we try to minimize waste as well as save also resources and money. And the third example from our own operations is from our coffee roastery here in Finland, where we have partnered with the Danish startup called Cafe Bueno, and they use our ground coffee waste from the factory to actually produce new products like cosmetics and functional food. So in the end, I think this comes to the circular economy thinking that in the end there shouldn't be any waste coming from the production of food, but all of the materials could be used for some other purposes or reused in the production. And then the last but not least is the example how we can use communications to actually inspire consumers to change their behavior. And I think that as a sustainable brand, we also need to use our communications and marketing resources to actually make consumers more aware of the impacts of their behavior when it comes to food. So we, for example, introduced a food waste calculator here in Finland, which we developed together with Luke, which is the Natural Resource Institute of Finland, and this food waste calculator helps Finnish households to estimate the amount of food waste and its impact and monetary value. And until now, already over 50,000 Finns they have used the calculator, and hopefully they have become more aware of the food waste and its impact. So I think that this is a topic overall, food waste, which is an interesting topic for the consumers as well. So there is a lot of potential to improve. So that was all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. It was really, I think, eye-opening thing that you said that people might actually overlook the importance of, for example, packaging in the accrued amount of waste generated. And also the food waste calculator was also a great initiative from Paulik. And now our third keynote speaker and last keynote speaker, she's the member of a parliament in Finland and also vice chair of the Green Party in Finland, a passionate advocate of climate awareness. Please be welcome, Iiris Suomela.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. My name is Iiris Suomela, and I'm the vice chair of the Finnish Greens. Currently, I'm also the interim party chair, while Maria Ohisalo is on her parental leave. On the topic of food waste, it was really interesting to listen to the previous keynotes, and many important points were already raised there. I will, of course, focus on policymaking since that's my specialty. The baseline is that food should not be produced in vain. Wasting food is an environmental, ethical, and economic problem that can and should be tackled with determined policy. And of course, this is only...
Sorry, Iiris. I think your camera is turned off. Could you, if it's possible, to turn it back on?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Does it work now?
Yeah, now it works. Perfect.
Okay, good.
Oh, it went off again.
Okay. It seems that I might not be able to look at my notes while I'm speaking, so it probably makes the most sense to just then speak very briefly and not
Yeah.
look at my notes?
Yeah, we can. I think that's the best way to continue. We can discuss about the things, I think, in the discussion section of the stream, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So just to mention really briefly a few things policy-wise in terms of preventing food waste. The point about packaging that was raised earlier is really important. So we need to look at the food chain as a whole rather than only looking at one part of the process. So whilst we might think that excess packaging is a bad idea in terms of the environment, it's of course important to consider that if the packaging is not good enough, if it's not protective enough, then we will produce food waste, and that of course has its environmental consequences. So that's why it's really important to look at this problem of making the food chain more sustainable holistically rather than just taking one part of it and only talking about that. It was also really important to notice that a lot of food waste is already generated during the production of food. Of course, we mainly think about food waste in terms of what households and restaurants produce, but then it's really important to remember that's only a small part of the problem. So we should also consider the production of food when we think about preventing food waste, and utilize different techniques, whether it's in agriculture or in further up the production chain, to make sure that we're not producing food waste early on in the supply chain. And then, of course, in terms of policy making, we can make sure that this is something that's considered in agricultural policy, in industrial policy, and then when we talk about waste management. And waste management is something that has been put a lot of emphasis on during this government. We've collaborated with municipalities to make sure that localities gather food waste and utilize the parts that can't be eaten anymore for producing things like biogas or otherwise making sure that the food waste is used in compost, and then whatever is produced from that is used maybe in food production, maybe elsewhere. It depends on where we are geographically, how we can best use food waste after it's already been produced. Then, of course, in terms of edible food waste, so for example, food that has gone past its sell-by date but is still considered edible, we've collaborated with food aid charities to make sure that that food can then be passed on to people in need, so that edible food is also not wasted. Then what we have also considered is sell-by dates and regulation to do with processing edible food waste. So it's of course really good that we're putting a lot of emphasis on food safety and making sure that inedible food cannot be sold. But then if we are too careful with legislation, then that is of course harmful, because then we produce too much food waste. So we've also tried to make the legislation, especially surrounding restaurants, more refined, so that different startups that contact restaurants and find out where left out food might be available can work and can provide that food to customers, rather than over strict regulation stopping these companies from working and sort of being overprotective. So this is something where we are constantly trying to develop legislation, because of course businesses are developing, and the laws shouldn't be hindering development on this area. I think finally, it's maybe not the most significant thing in terms of a short-term environmental impact, but in terms of a longer-term development, is of course important. This is something that's considered already in education. So we are trying to develop the curricula of schools to make people aware of food waste and different techniques to stop food waste, not just focusing on domestic food waste, but also making customers aware of the whole production chain, and making already younger children aware of how food production could be more sustainable. And in terms of the sustainability of our food industry, there's of course a lot going on, and this portion of food waste preventment and circular economy is just a small portion of that. So we're trying to, for example, further the use of vegetable-based products and other forms of food development where we can also reduce the environmental impact of food, not just through circular economy, not just through preventing food waste, but looking at the system as a whole. I think that's all right now. I tried to be brief because I think that when we get to the discussion, we'll have a lot more to talk about. Thank you, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Iris. I would actually like to hop on the question or the legislation part that you laid out there, because I think it would be interesting to hear from Kaisa, like what do you think are the legislative obstacles right now that Paulik might have faced in Finland or internationally?
Yeah, good question. I think Iris mentioned quite a few there, but maybe something that was not mentioned, and we have not probably faced that yet, but maybe in the future, if we want to develop new products from these side streams or waste products and sell them as food products, that's probably something that or currently the process is at the EU level also, that they need to go through the novel food processes, which is quite a heavy process. I have understood that it could take years to get them approved at the EU market. So maybe in the future, when we are moving more towards circular food system, maybe that's something that we need to also rethink a little bit.
All right, thank you. So what do you think, like with to all three of you, what do you think are the most meaningful action an individual consumer can take to help reduce food waste?
If I continue,
Yeah.
I think that maybe one of the things is that we would need to start to appreciate food much more. I think that we are too far from the origin of the food. We just think about the supermarket when we think food, or the restaurant. We don't really think about the whole value chain, and I don't think that we have to be aware of the whole value chain. But overall, if we would understand a little bit more about the resources that have been used to produce that food, and both natural resources as well as the human resources, I think that probably we would start to appreciate food even more. So it could help a lot.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think, Iris?
Well, a lot of food waste is produced already during the production of food, so that's something that the consumer can't directly have an impact on. So firstly, I think it's important to look at the environmental footprint of whatever you're buying. So trying to be a more informed customer is of course important otherwise as well, but especially in terms of food waste, that's something to look at. So trying to consider whether what you're buying has already produced a lot of food waste before it even hits the shelves. But then, of course, it's important to, like Kaisa said, appreciate food and only buy what you need. And when this has been researched on a behavior level, what has been noted is that people who try to plan their eating and plan whatever they're cooking in advance have been more efficient in preventing food waste. So that's of course something that everyone can do, trying to really plan what you're cooking and only buy what you need. And then of course make use of scraps or leftovers before they go off. And this is actually something where I think Finland is actually quite good, because of course we have domestic studies already quite early on in school. It's a subject that's not taught in all countries. And the curricula of that subject has been constantly developed to take the environment into account more and more. So that's a really good development, and that's something that we should keep on whenever we discuss schools and our curricula. Then, of course, it's important that food is sold in packaging that is suitable for the average size of households. An increasing number of Finns are living on their own. So it's, of course, important that food items are not sold in family-sized packaging only. So people should be able to just buy what they need and what they're planning to eat before the food item goes off. And that's yet again something that the customer can, of course, have a direct impact on, mainly through giving feedback and buying the best options available. So if I summarize, I think it's, of course, important what one does whenever one's cooking and eating and buying food, but then it's also important to be an informed citizen and try to push for political change, because so much of this problem is structural and it can't be prevented only by people making better choices as customers. There also needs to be political change.
Yeah, thank you, Iris, for elaborating. I have a question for you, Maria, about the role of academia. Like, what is the role of academia in the UN sustainability goal? Like, what can researchers do to achieve the UN's goal of halving the per capita food waste by 2030?
I think first we should quantify the amount of the food waste and food loss in every step of this food value chain. And then more research is needed to find a way to reduce the food loss, as I saw in my presentation. For example, supporting the small stakeholders could be very important in coffee production. And also by research, for example, our research group is doing this life cycle assessment, so food loss and waste could be or are included in them too. So we could show what's the impact of the food waste on the environment. It has been told that if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, just after USA and China.
Thank you, Maria. I have a similar question for Kaisa and Iris. What do you, Iris, think is business's role in reducing the food waste?
Of course, businesses have a key role in reducing food waste because most of our food comes from private enterprises. It's quite rare that people would grow their own food or hunt or gather. Of course, that's something that Finns do, but on an international level, it's quite rare that people would procure their own food. So businesses are the key in terms of furthering change here. And we as legislators try to make sure that sustainable development is something that's encouraged, that the structure of the economy is pushing for sustainability rather than trying to hinder developments, and that the legislation is setting the right boundaries in terms of sustainability, but not hindering positive developments. And that's, of course, something that requires really careful collaboration with businesses and researchers, so that we are always ahead of new developments. And that is challenging, and it's quite common that we notice that whenever we are able to renew one part of legislation, then as soon as we're done with that, we find out that there's a new area that needs to be developed. Kaisa mentioned the role of the EU earlier on, and that's, of course, increasingly important in preventing food waste. And that's, of course, important to businesses because more and more companies are going international and selling their products, at least in Europe, perhaps to even a wider international audience. So it's become increasingly important to consider the point of view of Finnish businesses whenever we are discussing food waste on an EU level. And then I think the main link here to current developments is perhaps through climate action, because of course the EU has taken a lot of steps forward in terms of developing climate policy making. And there it's also really important to remember the role of companies that produce food, so that we can make sure that no part of necessary developments are left behind when we're having these discussions.
Thank you, Iris. What do you guys think about the impact of legislation? Is it something that will foster more innovation, or is it something that that is actually killing it, or like will companies be more innovative with their solutions if companies would stay more? I mean, the politicians would stay more away.
Actually, I do think that the regulation is good in the area of food. If we think about, for example, the food quality and how we need to have some kind of framework or something within the companies need to operate, and we want to protect, of course, the consumers of any harmful harmful products and so on. If there wouldn't be any regulation, then it would be a wild west and so on. So I think that it's good that there is regulation, and then I just think that the regulation needs to also evolve and develop when new processes and new production methods and new products come to the market. So then that's only something what I hope, that, for example, what comes to the quality of food and the food safety, I think it's extremely important that there is regulation. And if I answer to your first question, what role the companies can take, I think that overall all the food companies, they are doing a lot. All sustainable food companies at least are doing a lot to prevent the food waste, because it's part of their sustainability work, but also a business decision for them, because that's oftentimes they can also save some money and save some resources if they can mitigate and minimize the food waste. And in sustainable companies, this topic is actually integrated in many of the operations. Like I explained, how we develop new products and how we develop packaging and how we actually develop our production processes, and how important is the quality on our agenda. For example, let's say I think all of us have seen cases, and every food company have had those unfortunate situations when you have to make a recall from the market because there has been some kind of problem which has been detected in the product. For example, a food quality issue or a food safety issue. So in these kind of situations, it's the food quality which actually overrides the food waste. So we cannot, of course, have any products in the market which are not meet the quality standards. But then there might be cases also that sometimes we need to withdraw the product or recall the product because for example, the package labeling is, for some reason, there is a wrong language or something like that. And in those cases, the product itself is okay, but we are not allowed to sell that product because it has the wrong ingredients list or something in the product. So in those kind of cases, we always try to find ways where we can actually donate the products, for example, let's say to our employees or to the retailer employees or something, or somebody else, because the product itself is okay. So I think that those are the kind of the gray zones between the legislation and then what just is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Kaisa. Maria, you have raised your hand. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, it's about this business and research. I was thinking about, Kaisa told about those spent coffee that is used. So also research could help with that to develop new products from waste that could be used as food again. there are different kind of side streams, and also that part of food that don't meet the quality standards, for example, feed, that maybe could be used instead of feed to food.
We have a question from the audience for you, Maria, about did you have cacao pod as a part of the research project?
Sorry, what?
Did you have cacao?
No, we had only coffee.
Coffee beans. All right.
Yeah, but that would be an important plant to study to this cocoa.
Okay. All right.
Because both of these species are likely to have difficult times because of climate change too.
Yes. For Kaisa, more about of the reuse of coffee grounds. What are your thoughts on using coffee grounds to grow food? For example, a startup called Helsiani produces mushrooms on coffee grounds. Do you see might be some mutual work you could do with these startups?
Yeah, I think sounds interesting, and overall, I think that we are continuously looking for these kind of collaborations as well. I have to say that coffee grounds seem to be very interesting for many parties, and currently we don't have enough of used coffee grounds for all the interested parties. So they are one of the kind of the ingredients or waste that actually has the most interest in the market. So there are many other leftovers probably which don't have so much demand, but I can actually show. Here is an example of the product. It's a Nivea product, which is actually produced from the used coffee grounds. It's a shower gel, so you can do different kind of things of these used coffee grounds.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Do you, Iris, think how could the government help this kind of working with startups and established larger companies? Are there ways that you could aid there?
Well, firstly, there's a really general change of direction that's perhaps needed in terms of our industrial policy making. What I've noted is that a lot of our industrial policy is geared towards larger enterprises, and we pay more notice to certain sectors rather than others. So what we really need is a general change of mind in trying to pay more attention to growing businesses and startups, and trying to especially look at our economic policy making from the point of view of startups. Something really concrete that could be changed is hearing more from startups when we are doing policy making. We tend to listen to larger companies and lobbyists that support their interests rather than paying more attention to startups. So that could be something that could be balanced in the future. And the Parliament recently formed a startup network with policymakers from different parties who are interested in supporting startups. So I think that's one example of positive developments on this area. One of my colleagues from the Greens, Mari Holopainen, became the vice chair of the group. So I'm really looking forward to what they are able to come up with. And I say this not because there needs to be some kind of a contrast between larger and smaller businesses, but rather because this is an area where politicians have maybe had a blind sector. So this is something that we need to take into account, because larger businesses are already collaborating a lot with startups. So we should catch up with businesses in what we think about when we think of industrial policy making. And here, for example, the role of technology, innovation, and research is really important. So maybe there needs to be a whole change of mindset in terms of policy making so that we can support startups more. And there has been a lot of positive developments, but I think more could be done still.
Thank you, Iris. Maria, you have your hand raised, please.
Oh yeah, just a short comment about those spent coffee use as in growth media. It maybe have some challenges because coffee has very low pH value, and it's very rich in nutrients and phenolic compounds that may disturb growth of some species. So more research is needed for that too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely much potential in developing or just smaller companies investing or doing more research on this topic. I have a bit more personal question to all of you. Like, what keeps you motivated while working with these kind of massive problems? Maybe Kaisa could start.
Yeah, I think that what keeps me motivated is of course I believe that companies can play a role in solving all different kind of sustainability issues in the world, and food waste is definitely very interesting because that's so close to the consumers as well as the other partners in the value chain. So my mantra has been that I believe that sustainable brands can change the world as well, and we should use our brand power to also inspire this change. So that keeps me motivated.
What about you, Maria?
Well, the topic is very important, but it's very hard work to get project funding for research. So how to put this? So well, maybe that's all.
All right. What about you, Iris?
Well, I think it's really interesting to be able to work with companies and researchers and different NGOs in terms of sustainable development. And I think the baseline motivation here is the fear of climate crisis that's approaching already. So it's kind of a grim picture, but what gives me hope and motivation is knowing that companies and politicians are taking this increasingly seriously and really trying to work to come up with solutions, and especially solutions that are positive for people as well. So we're trying to make the change that's already occurring fairer and more sustainable in terms of social and economic aspects as well. So it's not just about tackling the climate crisis and trying to support sustainable development in terms of the environment, but there's also this whole wider discussion taking place, and I find it really interesting, and I think that's something that keeps me motivated. So it's been really interesting to be here, for example, to hear from researchers and the point of view of companies so that we can work towards sustainable development together.
What do you, Iris, think about cultural obstacles in Finland? Are there some that actually prevent us from reducing food waste?
Well, the obvious question, of course, is people thinking that food waste is somehow inedible or is trash and can't be used for any other purpose than thrown away. And that is a significant thing to overcome, especially in terms of edible food waste. We need to sort of overcome the thought that the sell-by date is absolute and nothing can come out of a food product that has gone past its sell-by date. Here, it's actually useful to learn from older generations because, of course, back when my grandparents, for example, were children, they didn't really have sell-by dates. So maybe we need to sort of go back to that attitude. Of course, take care of food safety, but balance it with sustainability and really considering food again rather than just straight away throwing it away. But there is, of course, a far larger question here in terms of sustainable development. It seems that a common misunderstanding regarding sustainable development is that it's always taking a step back in terms of the economic and social well-being of people, when actually we can combine taking steps forward in terms of economics and social development with environmental sustainability. We can solve different problems all at once. And here, furthering circular economy is a really good example, because normally wherever we can use waste, we are also saving money as well as the environment. So this is an area where it's especially easy to find solutions where the steps that can be taken forward both save money, save the environment, and help us develop on a social level as well. Another example of social sustainability is, of course, the fact that a lot of restaurants and stores, when they get food products that are close to their sell-by date, a common solution is to donate that food to charities that help families and people in need. So there really is a close link here between things like trying to prevent inequality, helping people in need, and then also solving environmental problems. So that's a solution to some of the problems that we have, the attitudes that still surround sustainable development.
Thank you, Iris. I have a question. Maybe we could start with Maria about. There's a question in the chat that if suddenly everybody in the world became vegetarian, what would be the impact of it? Could the food chain system handle it?
Oh, I asked that from my friend, and she told that there would be a huge amount of food waste in form of meat if suddenly everyone would eat only plant-based food. But it's true that livestock uses about 80% of the agricultural land nowadays, but it supplies only 20% of food calories. And this animal based foods, they usually have bigger environmental footprints when it's calculated per unit of product compared to plant-based food.
Yeah,
but not all the plant-based foods, they have not small environmental footprint either. So everyone has heard about avocado that uses huge amount of water, or soybean that use land so much in a bad way. But I think it's a complicated question if the change is very, very fast.
Yeah. Does Kaisa or Iris want to comment or continue on that? Iris, please.
Well, I think realistically, it's more likely that this change will happen quite slowly. And already, if we could sort of slow down the increase in terms of the consumption of animal-based foods, that would already be beneficial, because currently the consumption of meat and dairy is growing globally. So if we were able to just slow down that development, that would be quite beneficial for the climate and the environment, because of course what's happening right now is that forests and other areas are cleared out to be able to feed cattle, and the amount of food that's produced from vast land masses being converted to agricultural use is not as big as if when compared to plant-based products. So Maria mentioned soy. I think it's important to remember that most of the soy produced in the world is actually used for cattle feed. And if all of that soy were to be used for human purposes directly, we would need far less soy to feed the world. So that's why it's important to consider this on a systemic level. But I don't think that it's very realistic that everyone would stop eating animal-based products overnight. I think it's more realistic to try to slow down the amount of animal-based foods that's being eaten right now, and especially look at the animal-based products that are the most damaging to the environment. Of course, we also have some forms of animal-based products where it's harder to replace that with plant-based stuff. We have areas of land that can't be used for plant-based agriculture. So then again, this needs to be looked at in a complex manner, taking into account geographic differences and other factors that have an impact on the food systems around the world.
Yes, thank you, Iris, for elaborating. Maria, you have your hand raised.
Yes, it's about it's that cattle. It does not only produce meat but other products too, like manure. So if not manure, then more where to get all these nutrients to produce those plants, because phosphorus is about to end in the world within forthcoming decades. So that's one question. And then I have to mention that it's also possible to produce meat in lab nowadays.
What do you think, Iris, about if I heard correctly, about the beneficial side of cattle? Maria, is that correct about it producing also manure and phosphorus? Or could you restate again, Maria?
Oh yes, you had it right.
Yeah. What do you think, Iris, about that? Do you see if there's positive effects of producing meat, or is the whole net impact only negative?
Well, firstly, I think, like I said, I think it's realistic to consider that we will still have animal-based products sold 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. And that's why we will still keep on being able to use the side streams of that production for farming plants. But in terms of trying to find alternatives to the use of manure and phosphorus, I think that there have been some technological developments here, and alternatives have been looked into so that we don't have to rely on either phosphorus or manure. There are also other options available. But right now, of course, these are important for food production, and that's why it's important to not make changes really drastically and quickly, but rather look at the research that's available and sort of try to make the change happen strategically and realistically, considering the system as a whole. There are, of course, forms of animal production that can be beneficial to the local nature. So when looking at things like sustainability in terms of the wide range of species that we have in different areas, we have some species that only thrive if there is a certain extent of animal production in the areas nearby. But here we're mainly talking about forms of animal production which are not sort of factory farming, but rather quite traditional, old-fashioned styles of animal production. And these forms of animal production are, of course, mainly slightly more expensive than factory farming. So this is also something that should be considered when we are developing agricultural policy. These types of animal production are maybe something that we should be supporting more rather than supporting factory farming.
Yes, thank you, Iris. I would actually like to hop on the thing that Maria stated about creating meat in the lab. I think, or do you want to Maria still comment on something?
Oh, it was just about what Iris told earlier, that it's not possible to produce wood everywhere in the world. For example, in very north, wheat is not growing there anymore, but grass is growing, and then the cattle can convert grass to protein that people can use. So I don't know if cattle is removed or livestock or all of those. Would it mean that we should import more food here? And that lab meat is quite novel method.
Yeah, I would actually.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I think it's not already available, like some chicken and some burgers that really are expensive, but maybe it's coming soon.
Yeah, I think there's actually, I would like to ask Kaisa about these plant-based substitutes. Like, I think there's at least a few companies nowadays from the US, I think Beyond and Impossible, and who are creating this plant-based meat. What do you think is Paulik's stance, or does Paulik think it would have a future in this kind of business? You already have the oat, the pulled oats, and do you think you will continue in expanding in those areas?
Yeah, I think Paulik is in a very interesting place in this respect because our portfolio is actually almost 100% plant-based, so we don't have any meat products or milk-based products. Mostly everything is plant-based. So we want to, of course, continue on that path. And as we are like masters of taste and flavor, what we can bring to the table is also to help these kind of different kind of alternative proteins to taste better, because people will never choose these new alternative foods if they don't taste good, and that they will also go wasted. So in that respect, the flavor and taste is really important. So what comes to sustainability. But what comes to the lab-based or lab-grown proteins and other products, I think that's another area which is very important and interesting. And we actually have an incubator, Paulik incubator called Pink, which is investing in these kind of startups. So we have, for example, invested in this Cafe Bueno, which I told you earlier, who is developing these new products from the ground coffee waste. But one of the companies where we have invested in is a Swiss-based company who is developing lab-grown meat. So we are not kind of closing any doors what comes to these like new ways of producing meat either. But so I would say that our stand is that we are very much in favor of plant-based, but at the same time, what was discussed here as well, we believe more in the flexitarian type of diet. So I think that overall people cannot change their behavior overnight, but they can maybe start to eat a little bit more plant-based and have more plant-based days in a week, and then try these new flavors and get used to them, and hopefully then they will like them also and choose them more often. So that's our approach.
Yes, thank you, Kaisa. I have a question for Iris about legislation. Like, for example, there's the U.S. company Impossible, which is creating plant-based meat, but the regulation in the EU is actually kind of against them because they are using genetically modified heme when they are producing it. What do you think? What is your or the your party stance on this? Should you help it and thus help tackle climate change, or are you against genetically modified heme?
I think the issue of GMOs is sometimes overtly politicized, and I think that this is really an area of policymaking where we should look more towards research and less towards sort of prejudices surrounding this discussion. And it seems that the legislation on GMOs in the EU is maybe a little backdated and should be updated to really answer the questions that we are having these days. So there really is a need to update regulation in terms of GMOs, and that update should be done based on research rather than overtly politicized prejudices. And of course, when discussing GMOs, I think something that is significant is, for example, the question of patents, because especially when you look at the discussion of food production globally, there are already farmers that are struggling to pay for patents when they're farming, and their GMO patents and seeds that are produced through those processes can sometimes be more expensive than conventional alternatives. So there is this whole economic discussion and discussion around social sustainability that we should be having surrounding this topic. But that's, of course, on a global perspective rather than just looking at EU legislation.
Yeah, thank you, Iris. We have a question from the audience about what would be some concrete steps for individuals to make more positive impact on the environment in terms of food consumption. Yes, Kaisa.
Yeah, it has been discussed already during this panel discussion, but it would be actually, I think, to replace meat with more plant-based options, and of course milk products then as well. I think it has the biggest impact on the overall carbon footprint of your eating. So that would be the first thing to do.
Yes, thank you, Kaisa. If does Maria or Iris have more to say? I think we actually, yes, we discussed it in the beginning of this conversation. But if you still have something to say, please, Iris.
I think it would also be important for more people to take interest in agricultural policy and policy making surrounding food production. Currently, this is a political topic where it seems that especially younger people are maybe not so excited about these discussions. So I think it would be really important to become politically active surrounding agricultural policy, even if that is not a topic where you've previously taken interest, because this is really an issue where we need political change as well as the change in the actions of consumers. It's far easier to eat less meat these days, for example, when there is more options available, and some of those options would maybe not be there had we not looked to the future in terms of policy making. So it's easier to make everyday sustainable choices if policymaking is progressive and sustainable. And that's why everyone should take an interest in agricultural policy and food policy.
Thank you. I have a question about entrepreneurship, because we are here because of Aalto Entrepreneurship Society and Aalto Ventures program. And how do you see entrepreneurship? Or the role of entrepreneurship in tackling these kinds of problems?
Yeah, definitely. I think entrepreneurs are needed here, and startups have been mentioned, for example. And I think what is currently developing quite fast is the food tech, for example. Like there was a really good article in the latest Talouselämä magazine here in Finland about the different food tech companies in Finland, and many of them are actually startups, and they have now got some funding as well. And as we do have also these like more established big food companies, quite many here in Finland, and I think all of us want to actually collaborate with the startups as well. So I think that there is a lot of potential to also, and hopefully also interest from the entrepreneurs to enter this food sector as well. So I feel that overall, that like Iris was also a little bit mentioning that there is probably not so much interest in these topics among young people and overall in media either, even though food is very close to all of us. And I think that, for example, in media, there is a lot of discussion about energy and these kind of topics, but I think that food is the next hot topic, and I think that we need all the different stakeholders to make this transformation towards more sustainable food system.
If I continue on that, I think the food sector is an area where the role of startups has been really important in developing more sustainable options. So a lot of the plant-based options available now have been developed by startups, and I think it's been really good that bigger companies have then invested in these startups and collaborated with them, maybe bought them off the market and then made these options more widely available. I, for example, remember the discussions surrounding pulled oats when they first came to the market. You couldn't find it anywhere, and people were discussing in these vegan groups as to where you can find a packet of pulled oats, and it was really obvious that more capital was needed to be invested so that this hugely popular option would be available to everyone, not just whenever you'd get a Facebook alert from a group saying that now the supermarket somewhere has got a new delivery in, but rather as an everyday option next to the animal-based options. So I think this is an area where startups have been really positive in terms of furthering sustainable development. And it's been really good that larger companies and the capital market has taken an interest in these startups. And I really hope that that's a development that can be enhanced and accelerated in the future, because it seems that we really need startups to come up with new solutions so that we can tackle climate change more effectively.
Yeah, I think so as well. That it's really great signal. Those Facebook groups just like trying to hoard this product, and I think that's a good signal for startup upcoming startup founders to really pay attention to the food market. More about the coronavirus pandemic. Like, how do you guys see, like, what has been the impact, or has it made it more difficult for Paulig to tackle or to tackle some part of the food value chain, or has it increased food waste, or what have been the implications?
Yeah, of course, it has had some implications, and for example, one implication was that in the beginning there was a huge shift from the kind of this out-of-home consumption, meaning the restaurants and cafeterias and hotels, to home, and the food manufacturing companies, they often have separate kind of products for these. Like for home use and then for this kind of more industrial use. So we had to kind of adjust our supply and demand to better fit with this new situation. So it took some time, and we had to move some resources as well. But we were able to prevent food waste, we organized some kind of like sales for also consumers, that they were able to buy these products which were bigger bags and so on, that were leftovers from this out of home production, and then in the longer term where we were able to make those changes also in our production. So that was probably one of the implications, and then another one was also that when the retail demand was increasing so rapidly, that we had to also make sure that we have the supply to support that demand as well. And now what we are seeing throughout the world is also the logistic problems that have occurred because of these changes in the market. So basically currently there is a lack of logistics and solutions to actually supply these raw materials for us. So it has been a little bit like a bumpy road for the last couple of years.
Thank you, Kaisa. What about you, Iris? Have you spotted any changes, for example, in people's behavior during the pandemic? Have you noted any changes because of it?
Well, of course, there's been a huge array of changes in terms of the food sector, and one has been the shift of demand from restaurants to supermarkets and cooking, and different solutions that make cooking easier, because we have people who, for example, always eaten lunch at work, and now when people have been working from home, they've suddenly had to come up with a way of being able to eat a hot meal without having to spend too much time on cooking. So it seems that there's been a whole new demand growing from the pandemic. Of course, the restaurant sector has taken a huge hit from the pandemic, and it seems that whilst some companies have been able to change and develop strategies that help them cope throughout this, for example, developing takeaway foods, some others have not been able to do that. So we really see a disparity in the market now. And it's, of course, important that we try to support companies throughout this crisis, especially now that we see that the crisis hasn't ended yet, and the virus might be with us for the upcoming years. We might never get rid of this virus. It might start going around as a less serious illness over the next few years. So we really should be able to take kind of a longer term view in terms of economic policy now, so that we can make sure that Finnish companies and European companies can manage through this crisis, whether that be the food sector or other sectors. This issue with logistics that Kaisa mentioned has also, of course, been really significant. I think the crisis has shown us how vulnerable the global economy can be. And that's why we now need to make sure that we are protected against those vulnerabilities in the future, so that essential sectors like the food sector aren't too massively impacted if we have similar crises in the future. And that's an area where we are developing legislation now, because this crisis has really been full of massive learning experiences. Someone could say mistakes, but I'd like to say positive and say that those mistakes are opportunities for learning, and that is really something where policymaking needs to be developed.
Yes, thank you, Iris, for elaborating. Maria, you have something to say.
Yes, we had this circular food project, and we were conducting pilots in housing companies, and people were growing food by themselves. And we have the novel solution for like vertical farming inside, not just boxes outside, and those Helsinki mushrooms, for example. And I think that timing for this was quite good, so people were very interested to produce their own fruit in cities too.
Yes, thank you, Maria. And what about you, Kaisa?
Yeah, it just came to my mind when Iris was talking about how people started to cook more at home, and that's definitely something that we have seen, as we also sell a lot of spices, and the consumption of spices increased a lot. But another thing that came to my mind was the fact that what we have noticed that because of the pandemic, people have actually got more interested in health aspects of food, which I think is a positive change. So I think that overall food sustainability is not only about environmental factors, but also health, that food should be good for the both planet health and people's health. So basically, I think that if this is the one of the implications, this pandemic also has some opportunities, like Iris said, that if people become more aware of the functionalities of the food and how they can improve their own health by eating more healthier food.
Thank you, Kaisa. I think we are closing soonish, but I think we should still discuss about, because we are here, we have brought all these fields together, academia, business, and politicians. I like to think to provide you the place where you could also comment on each other, like what you should do, what the other parties should do to tackle this problem. Like, for example, Iris, could you say what businesses and academia should right now do to tackle, like what will be the bullet points?
Well, I mentioned that it's been really good to see larger corporations collaborating with startups and collaborating with researchers. And that's something that needs to be continued and developed. And of course, that's something that we also try to support as policymakers. So that's certainly something that I hope to see in the future. And then we are, of course, trying to make sure that there's enough funding for research so that we can find new solutions to environmental problems and general other problems surrounding sustainability. So in terms of research, of course, it's important that there's academic freedom, and that's why my message is keep on doing the good work, and we are trying to do what we can to make sure that there's enough funding and other opportunities for furthering research. It seems that there's several areas where we need more research to come up with solutions. For example, this whole topic of what the food system would look like if a large portion of the population of the world had a more plant-based diet. That's a topic that we discussed here, and that's something where more research seems to be needed. So certainly that's an area where I hope to see more developments in the future. And then when we have new research, I think it'll be interesting to see what companies make of it, because like we said before, most of our food comes through private enterprises, and that's why it's important that companies take a leading role in furthering sustainability.
Thank you, Iris. What about you, Maria? What is your message to business and politicians?
I think Iris said it all.
What about,
Don't you, Maria, want to ask more funding for research?
but she already told that she will give.
That needs to be there. Yeah, good. Yeah, I think that what is my message to the ones who are creating the legislation, like Iris, you mentioned at some point that many food companies, they are operating internationally, and what we experience in many other areas already where there are regulations, that still, even though we have a EU regulation as well, the implementation of regulation differs from country to another, and sometimes it's really difficult for these kind of international companies actually to comply with the regulation, because it differs so much. This is, for example, the case what comes to recycling currently, and the systems are so different. So my hope is that when the regulators look at the Finnish market, they would always keep in mind also that many of the companies operate also in other countries, so have the EU point of view there as well, and try to align with the EU legislation. And for the academia, I want to thank Maria once again for relentless work to understand the world better. And if we understand the world better, then we are able to develop new solutions. So definitely academia plays a huge role here.
Yes, I would like to thank you all for joining Aalto EAS and Aalto Ventures program today, and I thought it was very insightful discussion, and I hope you all have learned something about the food waste from the different fields, and I think like right now we are running out of time, so thank you for all of you viewers, and to you Kaisa, Maria and Iris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Yes, we are in, but honey, trust me. You know, I'm always right. We can grow bigger and better. Grow always smarter. If you just let us stay apart. Stay apart. Grow bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. Grow bigger and better. It's been too many years in this care, aren't you?
Hey.